Do you feel like you've put a lot of effort into healing your trauma, but you're still easily activated in dealing with the same symptoms or problems? Have you ever wondered why, even after therapy and years of positive thinking and affirmations, certain memories or reactions keep coming up? Have you experienced some breakthroughs only to find that old patterns continue to resurface later? So healing trauma is an especially layered and multidimensional process and journey that is often misunderstood for various reasons. People want quick fixes, and people are intimidated by their emotions and their fears. And then there's the complication that people who invest in trauma healing are operating from their unresolved traumas. So they're likely approaching healing their traumas from trauma responses that then makes them do too much or do too little or, remain emotionally dysregulated, etc. A listener asked me, I've done the work and it continues every day, but I still hold on to the trauma. How do I let it go after years of self-work? So in today's episode, I'm going to answer that question, and I'm going to discuss why it's so common for people to get stuck in their traumas despite investing in healing for a while. Welcome to The Simple Source, your source for all things self-love, self-healing, personal growth, and spirituality. I'm your host, Linda Valines. I used to be chronically sick and unhappy. I spent years trying anything and everything to heal, but I never got better. It wasn't until my late husband was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer that I finally stopped searching for the answers outside of myself and turned within. I taught myself how to truly love and heal myself, how to finally be authentically healthy and happy, mind, body, and soul. I have over 10 years of personal and professional self-healing and teaching experience. I'm a trauma-informed, certified holistic health and wellness coach, certified Ayurvedic counselor, and author. I healed myself of a lifetime of complex traumas and chronic conditions with joy and ease. Now I'm teaching you to do the same. So if you're ready to heal and love yourself more, mind, body, and soul, without all the struggle and stress, and with more joy and productivity, join me to liberate your highest, healthiest, and happiest self and learn how to thrive more simply. Let's get started with today's episode. This is unfortunately a very frequent experience for people, and it's frustrating and it can feel really discouraging. I can certainly relate. I spent years on a healing journey before I actually learned how to heal productively. And it can be really disappointing to invest a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of resources into your healing journey and then experience very little reward or feel like, when is this going to end? When am I going to get better? When will I be free of this pain? But healing and liberation are possible. I'm a living testament to that. There are many, countless living testaments to that. So many people approach healing trauma with insufficient unidirectional methods that neglect to resolve the root cause, encourage lifetime management of symptoms, or just simply ignore the crucial integration of mind, body, and soul that then, of course, results in lackluster healing outcomes. Affirmations, positive thinking, self-love, self-care, talk therapy, they're great by themselves, but they're not going to heal your trauma. So if you listen to my trauma episode, which I hope you did, you understand that trauma is a holistic experience. So if you only approach your trauma healing process with mental practices like changing your mindset and cognitive processing, like in talk therapy, or even, through reading books, you're neglecting the other critical components. Also, no, I say this a lot, but it's such a key problem for so many people, and this is just fact. Knowing is not the same thing as healing. So that means understanding your trauma on an intellectual level because you've read a lot of books or you've talked through it with your therapist for a while. That's not the same thing as mind, body, nervous system, subconscious reprogramming, and conditioning. It's just not the same thing. You can read all the books, but that information alone is not going to make a difference unless you put what you learn into experiential and consistent holistic practice. And then it becomes integrated and embodied, meaning essentially until you achieve neuroplasticity and nervous system reconditioning. Trauma resolution requires a holistic, truly holistic mind, body, and soul approach. And so that means it requires more than just learning, obtaining knowledge, and talking about it and cognitively processing it. It requires productive and effective neuroplasticity, nervous system reconditioning, and subconscious programming. That's so key. So you may have only healed certain surface level aspects of your trauma. You may have accepted it. You may have started utilizing mindfulness practices, affirmations, and conditional self-love. But the core trauma narrative that's embedded in your subconscious programming is still largely untouched or unchanged. If you're still experiencing symptoms of unresolved trauma, be it mental, emotional, or physical. So subconscious healing work, which is a big part of my approach and my program, alongside reconnecting with your authentic self or your soul, that's what produces lasting and holistic trauma resolution. That's what produces any kind of holistic healing, because it's a true integration of those key aspects of your existence, and it honors that you're more than just a brain and a body, but you are a soul. And the state of your mental and emotional health, of course, affects your spiritual health. And all of that works in tandem. You're not these disparate parts where like, okay, my mind gets it, and then yet you still have all these unprocessed emotions and unprocessed grieving and all this literal trauma stuck in your cells and in your muscles and in your body. And then you're also like totally disconnected from your true self. Trauma healing is not going to happen for you that way. So also people have to understand what trauma is, which is, most people think trauma is the event, like I was abused, I was emotionally neglected, we broke up, my husband passed. But that's not the trauma. The trauma is actually your personal response to the event. So if you don't understand that, which is how your brain and your body work, essentially, and then also how your brain and a body adapted to accommodate for that unresolved trauma, that response in you to that event, then it's going to be very difficult for you to integrate all of that information in a way that works with how your mind and your body actually function and heal themselves. And also it's going to be difficult for you to integrate that knowledge with effective practices that then reach your subconscious programming and then alters your nervous system states. Like, do you see how layered it is? I have had a lifetime of trauma. I survived decades of all sorts of child abuse and adverse childhood experiences, racial trauma, traumas as an adult from toxic relationships, and then my husband passed at the age of 39. And then also I had a lifetime of chronic conditions like physical health problems. I've had a lifetime of complex traumas that run the full gamut, mental, emotional, physical. So for me, becoming trauma informed and integrating trauma into my healing is when I actually started to really experience profound and authentic and lasting changes. And part of being trauma informed is you have to understand that trauma is different for every person. And so I had to realize that for me, my traumas, even though trauma is universal, many people are unfortunately abused in many ways as children. Basically, everybody has some sort of an adverse childhood experience nowadays. Trauma is so universal, but because again, trauma is not the event. Trauma is the response to the event. The trauma is so deeply subjective and personal to me. And so if you're just following someone else's version of how they healed their traumas, which is also what tends to happen when you're just reading books and you're trying to apply what you read in books in your own life, there isn't an identification of the differentiation of that's your trauma narrative and this is actually my trauma narrative, which is so key. So then now let's talk about a lot of the common misconceptions that people have about healing trauma. I just talked about one, which is like everyone's healing trauma journey is the same. And it's not. And these misconceptions can keep you stuck in your trauma healing journey. So healing trauma isn't about mental breakthroughs. It's not about insights, even though those aha moments are so essential. They're so critical for moving forward in your trauma healing journey. Healing trauma is about acknowledging and working with trauma's deeper subconscious layers that reside, that control your nervous system and your body. Trauma embeds itself because it's your nervous system response. It embeds itself in your very biology. It creates stored emotional patterns and subconscious associations that then can keep you locked in cycles of reactivity, right? Those trauma responses. Even if consciously you know that you're not in a traumatizing situation, even if consciously you have an understanding about your trauma, if you have not reached the subconscious level where your trauma lives, then it's still running you. And so to move from understanding trauma to actually healing trauma, you have to work with the body's and the subconscious mind's deep programming where the trauma is rooted. And approaching trauma through traditional methods alone, like positive thinking, cognitive processing with talk therapy, that's helpful. Of course, that's helpful, but they often miss the mark in the long run because they don't, again, reach the layers where trauma is stored, the holistic layers where trauma is stored. You can't talk your way out of trauma because trauma lives in your body. You can't positively think your way out of trauma because trauma requires you to access the dark and deep and uncomfortable emotions that you're probably avoiding by trying to think positive all the time. So trauma lives in the subconscious mind, the nervous system, the body, meaning it's experienced and remembered viscerally in physical responses and automatic emotional reactions that bypass your conscious awareness and thinking. Because again, they originate from the subconscious parts of your brain. Your subconscious part of your brain is so much more powerful than the conscious part of your brain. And I did a whole episode about that, so you should go and revisit that episode. When healing is only focused on the conscious mind, right? Understanding the trauma, building a positive conscious relationship with your trauma, accepting your trauma, that's all conscious level healing work. And a lot of that is managing external symptoms of trauma, like anxiety or depression. But again, when you're managing symptoms, that's not the same thing as healing. And that's not going to create the kind of lasting transformation that occurs when we do engage the nervous system, the subconscious mind, and the body, and the soul in the entire trauma healing process. Trauma affects us in ways far beyond what we traditionally talk about, even though trauma is becoming more of a common topic of conversation, which is great. It's still being discussed with a lot of misconceptions and discomfort around it. That's because people are so largely uncomfortable talking about their feelings and their authentic truths. So again, we can't talk our way out of trauma. Unresolved trauma is the result of conditioned fear, and that's trapping your nervous system in a dysregulated state, and then creates subconscious associations and a somatic memory that lives in your body that over time manifests as everything from digestive issues to insomnia to persistent emotional dysregulation to feeling disconnected from life and, being constantly disassociated. I mean, it's just so many ways that unresolved trauma manifests over time. And so it's not just all in here, pointing to my head. It's literally mind, body, soul. And I do discuss this in the trauma episode. I keep reverting back to it, but I don't want to explain what trauma is here. I want to answer the listener's question. So listen to that episode. Okay. So to effectively and authentically heal trauma holistically, you have to invest in mind, body, reconditioning, subconscious programming, and reconnecting with your soul. Because without that holistic approach that does focus on subconscious programming, you're going to experience temporary relief likely, but of course, you're going to continue to be activated because subconsciously you're still operating from that trauma. And so that means the same problematic cycles are going to surface because you're operating from that false sense of inner safety and dysregulation. I've been on a healing journey for nearly 15 years, and wow, that's a good amount of time. And I'm still healing deeper layers of all the trauma that I've experienced in my life because, like I said before, I have lived through a lifetime, 40 years of trauma. Now, that's not to say that I haven't healed. Of course, I certainly have healed so much of the trauma, but there's more inner child work to do. There's more shadow work to do. There's more self-love, even for someone like me, who's like an unconditional, radical self-love advocate and teacher. There's more self-healing because, again, I didn't survive like a few instances of trauma. I survived many decades of it. And you can't erase all of that, in 90 days. So what's truly moved the needle in my healing journey is unconditional radical self-love work, which is essentially shadow work and inner child work, which are essentially subconscious healing work, and also somatic practices or releasing the trauma from my body in intentional and safe ways. And also, this is key, reconnecting with my authentic self, my soul. So that combination of a mind, body, soul approach is what made the difference. And that's why I teach what I teach and how I teach in my program, and why it's proven to be so effective. Because otherwise, you're only tackling an issue from one side when it's in fact a three-dimensional problem. So here's a breakdown of how I teach holistic trauma resolution in stages, and hopefully it's going to help you understand what's missing for you and how to experience more liberation and less frustration in your own healing journey. So stage 1 is identification. This is the initial phase when you determine exactly what your trauma is and you establish an understanding of when it occurred, why it was traumatic, how it's currently affecting you. You have to understand your trauma at a granular level. Detail, specificity make a difference. And that's why I have over 1,000 journal prompts in my program. You have to know yourself in order to heal yourself, friend. Stage 2 is acceptance. That's when you make peace with the fact that the trauma occurred, the role the trauma has had in your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual life. This is the ownership stage, the validation stage, when you take responsibility for the healing of your trauma, and then you make the commitment to remain accountable for how the trauma has shaped you and how you're going to heal it. And this is when you step out of that victim consciousness and really intentionally walk into your personal empowerment. And then stage 3 is confrontation. So this is when you begin to address and examine the holistic effects of your traumas. This is the investigative phase, the negotiation phase, when you gain a deeper, more comprehensive awareness of how your trauma has manifested itself in you and in your life. And you have to do that in order to determine the best personal strategies for you, again, because trauma is so subjective. You have to determine then what the best personal strategies are for you to release your specific traumas that are affecting your mind, your body, your soul. And that's going to be different for everybody. Some people respond well to leaning towards more somatic practicing or experiencing. Some people respond more to like EMDR, going deep into specific memories. Some people respond more by doing a combination of tapping and talk therapy and energy work. I mean, there's so many, I discuss all of it in my program. There's so many ways to approach healing trauma, and you have to approach it with different tactics because, again, trauma is a multidimensional thing. And if you just unilaterally approach it with, I'm just going to talk about it with my therapist for 5 years, you're only going to get so far. So the confrontation stage is also when you begin to work through your traumas on a surface level so that you can provide the groundwork for the deeper healing work stages that come after this. So essentially, Confrontation is when you look at your trauma through the lens of empowerment while also engaging with it to determine what truly needs to be resolved and released for you. Because again, trauma is unique to everybody. Now, stage 4 is emotional release. So this is so key. When you intentionally embrace and feel and process and release all the emotions that are connected to the trauma, you're going to heal more productively. This stage is so crucial because suppressed and trapped emotions make healing trauma impossible. Like if you're still dealing with trauma, then for sure, I would bet that there are emotions that you have yet to fully feel and process and release. Grief is a big, big part of this stage too. Your nervous system and your body require you to release your emotions. I mean, that's what emotions are, energy and motion. So if they're not in motion, meaning they're stuck, you've suppressed them, repressed them, they're stagnated in your body, of course you're going to experience symptoms, mental or physical symptoms, because they need to move. That's in the nature of emotions. But you have to learn how to do that safely and productively, which I teach in my program too, because a lot of people, they get completely overwhelmed by their emotions because they don't know how to productively feel because they're not in command of their nervous systems, of themselves. We can't heal unless we feel. So stage 5 is what I call mental reframing. And that's when you provide your brain, your mind with a new narrative, a new meaning, a new purpose of your traumas in order to build positive associations that allow for neuroplasticity and allow for nervous system recalibration. This is very important. So this is when you create healing cognitions that replace the distorted cognitions that trauma causes. When you begin to understand the traumas from a healthier, more empowered place, and you can develop a healthier and more empowered narrative of yourself and of your past. And this is when you begin to reprogram your mind so that it can let go of that old trauma narrative and embrace the lesson, the healing, the growth, the self-love, the self-trust, the self-acceptance, the self-compassion, all of it. This is when you mentally reclaim your worth, your wholeness, your lovability, your enoughness, your capability, your goodness, all of that. And then stage 6 is physical reconditioning. And this is when you reestablish safety in your body and in your nervous system. This is when it becomes a focus. So the primary objective of this stage is taking conscious command over your body's stress response and completing the unresolved stress cycle of trauma so that your nervous system can operate with safety and security as your new normal instead of that old conditioned fear response and hypovigilance. You can't heal when you're stuck in nervous system dysregulation. You can't heal. You're not designed that way. And if your body is trapped in a trauma response and a fear response, is stuck in survival mode, you're going to have a really hard time healing. And so you have to work with your body to tell your body that you're safe, that the trauma is over, and that you are in a loving, calm, and an emotionally regulated state of being, meaning you're in command of your present self. And this takes practice. This takes a real conscious awareness of when you're stressed, like, period, because all stress is stress to your body. And so when you're living in a chronically stressed state and you have a lot of unresolved trauma, your body's just going to have a really difficult time turning off that stress response and reconditioning your nervous system. So this is really huge. And this is why somatic exercises and learning how to physically self-regulate is so essential to genuine and lasting trauma healing. And so the final stage is integration and freedom. And this is when you holistically integrate all your trauma healing work through consistent self-acceptance and self-love and effective personalized strategies and practices and emotional release and subconscious reprogramming and healing and nervous system reconditioning. And you arrive at embodied and genuine safety, wholeness, well-being, and true autonomy of your authentic self. This is when the trauma is no longer running you and you've achieved neuroplasticity and you're free of the trauma's emotions and narratives and responses, and you are holistically free of it. And That's not going to happen overnight, friend, unfortunately. Like I said earlier, it's not going to take 90 days. And even though you've been on a healing journey for a while, it's not going to take a lifetime either. It's a process that does take time and consistency and commitment, and also a willingness to show up for all parts of yourself with love and courage and tenderness. But if you approach trauma healing productively, moving through all of those stages and with intention, and structure, which is really key, structure is safety for the body. Anytime you continue to operate in dysregulation, then you promote dysregulation in your nervous system. So that's why structure is actually really powerful for a productive healing journey. And that's why I teach it in my program, because it provides a sense of stability and safety for your body that enables it to heal more readily and easily, which I guess is the same thing as readily. So liberation and healing are possible, friend. Like, regardless of the depth of the trauma, it doesn't matter how severe the trauma is, you can heal it. Trust me. Even the darkest and deepest hurts and pains can be healed and transformed into beautiful friends and healing allies and blessings. And you have to also embrace that perspective. You really have to transform your whole relationship with the trauma instead of viewing it as a burden, as chains in your life, as this thing that's keeping you down. I mean, it is such a massive opportunity for you to thrive. On the other side of the trauma is like a higher, more empowered, more self-actualized, more self-realized version of yourself. But that path to liberation and peace do entail a genuine willingness to meet those dark and deep aspects of yourself with love and commitment and structure, because again, structure is safety, and safety is what activates and sustains healing. And that's why my program is structured the way that it is. And it's not just a collection of workshops and courses, but it's a progressive, systemic, structured approach to mind, body, soul healing that all begins with self-love and safety and nervous system regulation. Safety is so paramount. And when you approach your healing in a way that is safe for your mind and your body, then of course, healing is going to be more productive, it's going to last, and it's going to be authentic. So that's another thing to consider. So here's your action step for the week. I want you to validate something that's connected to your trauma, whether that's a feeling, a repetitive thought, a memory, or even you avoiding certain emotion or avoiding grieving. And intentionally take a moment to breathe and be with that thing and acknowledge it, and then give it love. Tell that thing that you see it, that you honor it, and then really, truly give it unconditional love. And then allow yourself to feel whatever feelings come up, because I guarantee there are probably going to be some feelings that come up. Self-validation signals safety to your nervous system, which is the very thing that's holding on to the trauma. Like when some aspects of you remain unvalidated, that's why you haven't healed. It's just like there are parts of the trauma that are unseen, unloved, have not been given your true attention. And so that's why I keep saying, it really does require a sincere willingness to see and love and embrace and make friends with all the aspects of yourself. You can't reclaim your wholeness if you only see yourself in parts. Self-validation may seem like a simple practice, but it's actually so powerful. It's so healing. It's going to create such major shifts, especially if you tend to use spiritual bypassing or you tend to suppress your feelings. Because anytime you turn within, you give yourself love and respect, and you honor an aspect of yourself that you've previously judged or been hiding or avoiding or denying, you are telling your nervous system, I'm okay in myself. Like, it's okay. It's safe for me to be myself. And so that creates a cascade effect between your subconscious mind, your nervous system, your body, where all of a sudden there isn't this resistance anymore, because that resistance is a real energy that is felt and experienced, from a neurological perspective, from a biological perspective, from a physiological perspective, that energy is felt. So when you let go of that resistance and you are fully available to yourself, then all aspects of that trauma are going to be available for your healing. Thank you so much for joining me today in The Simple Source. I hope this episode has inspired you, reminded you of your healing power, and reawakened you to who your true and highest self is. If the show has empowered and enlightened your self-love, growth, and healing journey, please share this episode, leave a positive review on Apple or Spotify, and subscribe to be reminded of new episodes. I am so grateful for your presence, and all of your comments and your support are seen and read and deeply appreciated. They really do help this show so much. Also, sign up for my newsletter, The Weekly Source, to get more healing tips, motivation stories, and to get to know me better. And if you haven't read my book, Unconditional, You Are Perfect As You Are, I invite you to get your copy today and start reading. And lastly, I would love to see you inside my Source membership, the only holistic and comprehensive step-by-step self-healing program that is proven to work. It's time to stop struggling to heal and time to learn how to thrive more simply and joyfully. All the links are in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me today, and I will see you next time.